I'm Ken. Been in this business for a long time. I've been a tropical fish collector since 1969. Did it for a living since 1978. I don't know how many, about 20, 30 years. So I ran a tropical fish business for a long time. Sea Life is the name of it. A few years ago, I just had a passion to do something different, kind of led there by my tropical fish farm and my live rock farm and a few other things. I'll get into that. There's a lot of different rabbit trails I might go on this talk, so if you have a question, stick your hand up and I'll answer it, and it might go on a rabbit trail, but I do have a PowerPoint that'll get me back on track. I just have to look at the pictures and see where I'm supposed to be going. So, can you hear me okay? It's, behind the speaker, I don't even hear myself. Okay, good. So, let me just dive in. This is a nonprofit. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. I know a lot about growing corals and being in the tropical fish business, so I'm learning through the nonprofit end of it. It's a different animal, but what we're trying to do, practical is probably the big word there. We're trying to come up with something that's practical to restore coral reefs, and I'll go into a little bit about the decline of coral reefs and all that in a minute, but there's a lot of impractical solutions out there. And so we're trying to come up with something that's a little more practical, something that can be done on a large scale, something we can duplicate. We use a lot of volunteers. I'm going to turn this around so I don't have to keep turning. So we use a lot of volunteers to do the work, which is different than most people have done. Trying to bring it down to the level of recreational diver or aquarist. It doesn't have to be a scientist to do this work. And right now we're working with mostly staghorn and elkhorn coral. We do have some other corals that we're starting to work with, and we're moving along. And so the question I've kind of been posing a lot of people lately, I had a talk that I did at the Key Largo Chamber of Commerce a few weeks ago, and the question I posed to them is, who are we and what are we known as? I should have backtracked. I was going to put a slide in today, but I forgot. So our business is in the Upper Keys, down in the Florida Keys right now. Key Largo, the island of Key Largo. Most of our work is being done there. And so the Key Largo Chamber of Commerce seemed like the likely place to go to get them excited about getting involved in this project. I'm not going to beat that too much, but the question is, who are we, what are we known for? And so just to click through a couple of slides, if you lived in New York City, or if somebody said New York, now the first thing that comes to most people's mind would be 9/11, because that was like the most, seared in our memories forever. But you might think Manhattan, you might think Wall Street, Central Park, shopping, the New York Yankees, the Jets. Those are some of the things that you say New York, fill in the blank after that. And those would be some of the words. I'm sure I missed some, but I don't live in New York. I'm just telling you some of the things that come to my mind. If I said Miami, you might think of Miami Vice if you're a little bit older, and the Miami Vice TV show. You might think of South Beach. You might think of Cuban food. I do. Good stuff. The Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, warm winters, hot summers. Those are some of the things you think of when you think of that. LA, smog, traffic jams, Hollywood, the Lakers. I'm not a big sports fan, but I had to dig to think of, but I think of the LA Lakers, and there's probably a few other Los Angeles sports teams. But if you think of Key Largo, somebody might remember the Beach Boys song, Kokomo. So a lot of people, that's the only thing they ever heard of. That's the first time they ever heard of Key Largo was in the song Kokomo. But a lot of people, we like to be known as, the place where John Penny Cave Coral Reef State Park is, coral reefs, scuba diving. But we're also known on the international community and the coral reef community as being lazy and as only caring about making money, trying to, we're looking out for ourselves, and we don't do anything to protect the reefs. And that's kind of that's the legacy that other people think of us, especially the people that like I said, in the coral reef community, it's kind of a strange, it's like the aquarium community. You've got some strange people in there, a lot of really cool people, but we fight all the time. But anyway, they kind of think that we're lazy at Key Largo. So I kind of take a little bit of offense to that. And I think, you don't know all of us. So what about reef keepers? People that keep tropical fish in aquariums. What are we known for? Well, we're part of the problem. At least a lot of people perceive that we're part of the problem. Now, I could argue that one for a long time, but they think of over-harvesting. They blame us for over-harvesting tropical fish, for cyanide fishing. I live in the Florida Keys. I've been a tropical fish collector for 30-something years, maybe 40 years. We never use cyanide. I mean, that's crazy. Who would use cyanide or dynamite, things like that? But everybody always says, oh, you use cyanide, don't you? Or I heard they use cyanide. Nobody in the entire Caribbean uses cyanide, but that label sticks to us. They think of destructive coral collecting. Most of the coral frags out there, and I don't know where they all came from, but a lot of them are probably wild collected. Some of them have been cultured or fragged in captivity, but how many are second, third, fourth generation frags? I don't know. I'm not bothered by it, but people think that the aquarium community is just destroying the coral reefs throughout the world, which is not true, but it still sticks to us. And then they think of death tanks. Well, everything dies in there. Everything dies in the wild eventually, too. A lot of times it gets eaten or it dies. Now, sure, when we're starting out, sometimes things die. It's a learning curve, but that's the kind of thing that we get known as. But I say, can we be part of the solution? And that's kind of what my talk is about. That's what my life is about now, is trying to be part of the solution and not the problem. And so I think aquaculture is the new and coming thing, captive breeding a lot of our critters, propagating the coral, reef restoration, sustainable harvesting. Those are the things that I want our industry to be known for. So I'm kind of working towards that with my life. So just a little quickie of what I want to go through today. Just give you a brief history on coral reef decline, what's happened, how we got started, how I got started in all this coral reef stuff, what we're doing, what our program's all about, and what we hope to be doing in a few years. So, like I said, any questions? I haven't done anything to ask a question yet. So another thing, I think I told you, I've been a collector since 1969. I put my way through college in the 70s. Back when I started with my first saltwater aquarium, there really weren't any books. There wasn't much. It was pretty crude, and I did have a lot of death tanks, but I learned, so it's interesting. So our current focus, as I mentioned earlier, is the acroporid corals, elkhorn and staghorn coral. I call them acropora. Some people call them acropora, tomato, whatever you want to call it. But these are the main Caribbean corals. These were the main reef-building corals of the Caribbean, and they grow really fast, just like all the acros. None of you have these in your tanks. They're never been legally sold in the United States, and they're now on the endangered species list as listed as threatened. So they need a lot of help. If you had dove in the Florida Keys in the 1980s, early 80s, late 70s, and you dove on any of these three reefs, I don't really know how well you can see that, but this is a reef here, there's another one there, and there's another one there. And the circles were the coverage of this live elkhorn coral, which was that stuff. And those reefs were acres and acres of elkhorn coral. You couldn't even swim over some of them. It was so thick and right up to the surface. But then things happened. They died from disease, from a few other things. And now that same reef, that's how much is left live. And I couldn't even get the dots small enough in PowerPoint it should have just been a period on each of those spots. That's all that's left. From a huge area like that to this tiny little dots. And they look like that now, just dead stumps. Another coral was the staghorn coral. You guys probably have some experience with other types of branching acropora corals. This is the only one in the Caribbean, and we think it used to be like that in the Florida Keys, just acres and acres of coral. And now, after a disease outbreak or one thing or another, they look like that within a year or two, and after a couple of hurricanes, that's all that's left. And so those reefs went from these beautiful, lush thickets of coral to that kind of thing in just a few years, and that's pretty much all you see down there now. So the question is, what happened? How did we go from this to that in just a few years? And a lot of people, there's a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of people first say, oh, it's water pollution, or it's global warming, or it's this, or it's that. And it's a bunch of different things, and they've all kind of accumulated. to cause the problem. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but in our longer sessions that we do in teaching, sometimes we kind of highlight every one of them and go into it a little bit. But there was like a tipping point in the late 70s. We had a cold front, and it snowed in Miami that year, and it got beastly cold. And for us, snow, and it actually snowed in Key Largo too. And for us, snow is if we see a flake coming down that's cold and looks like snow, it's snowing. It doesn't have to stick. It doesn't have to be more than a couple of flakes, but snow for us, you just don't see it. You guys have a different opinion of snow, but so it got really cold, and these corals don't like cold, and so we lost a lot of corals that year. The corals that didn't die in that cold winter died from disease in the next spring or summer, like in 1977 in the spring, this white band disease outbreak. So that was a real tipping point. You know, our coral population took a real whack during that event. And then in 1980, we had the first bleaching event. That's where the water got really, really hot, and still, and everything started to bake, and the corals all bleached, and that was a real eye-opener for us. We had never seen that before, and a lot of people were stunned. Yep.
What's really hot?
Really hot. Yeah.
I mean, like, how hot does it get normally? 86?
86 is normal. I mean, 85, 86, you know, is our normal summer temperature. So it'd get to like 87, 88, and it wouldn't stay that all the time, but there's like a threshold, and it just kept going over that threshold every day during the day, and it dropped down a bit. Just this elevated. For the corals to bleach, it usually takes several weeks of past that certain threshold, and then a lot of times when you got almost all of our bleaching events have been associated with an El Nino event, which is this southern oscillation off, you know, South Pacific. And so not only did the winds slacken up, but we have very little rain during those periods. So we have a real still summer, you know, very light winds, no rain. So you have this real high penetration of light into the water, and then the water is warmer. So it just combines, and it doesn't happen the first week. It usually takes several weeks of that. And you could be right to the edge where they're going to bleach, and then a storm, a hurricane comes through, or you get a week of cloudy weather, and everything's good again. So that's a good question, though. So there's all these other things, and probably the bigger two of all of them, I think I have a little bullet point on it later, but the loss of the sea urchins. A lot of you people know Martin Moe, Skip Moe. He's kind of like the grandfather of a lot of this. He and I have been working with diadema for a while, and we call him, he's like Mr. Diadema now, because that's all he talks about is these long spine sea urchins. So there's a few of these other things. Yeah, we have had more than 1 year of coral bleaching. We've had a lot of hurricanes. In 2004, 2005, we had 8 hurricanes hit the Keys, or brushed close enough so we had damage. You know, hurricanes are a natural event, but when you have 8 of them in a year, there's a recovery period that needs to take place. Water quality is not what it used to be. In January of last year, we had a cold front that was a lot like the one in 1977. We didn't have any snow, but it got really, really cold, and we lost a lot of corals. This is what the Black Sea sea urchins, long spine sea urchins I was telling you about. Prior to 1983, they were all over the place. There might have been too many of them, but they performed the role of like a snail or an astrea snail in your tank, or a blue lake hermit. They ate the algae, and they kept the reef clean. And when they died off in 1983, about 98% of them throughout their entire range died off. Then the reefs quickly, a lot of the reefs turned into algae-dominated reefs, where they look just all fuzzy and macroalgae growing, and corals don't like algae, so there's like this little battle that goes on. So that was a major thing. I don't think that had ever happened. That's really kind of was probably the biggest tipping point that we've come across. And then this white band disease. A lot of you guys have grown corals. You might have rabbit tissue necrosis. This is very similar. There's a leading edge of the disease right in there, and it travels quickly. Most of this dead stuff in here is, you know, about